Nefertiti is a dazzlingly beautiful woman. No one really knew who she was. No one was looking for her. And then suddenly there she was in all her splendor.
In 2010, Egypt finally allowed DNA testing on royal mummies after decades of blocking it, and the results on Queen Nefertiti hit researchers like a shockwave. Her genetic profile did not just rewrite her family line, it exposed disturbing signs that her death may have been violent.
The final resting place of ancient Egyptian Queen Nefertiti could finally have been discovered thanks to advances in modern technology.
Fractures in her skull, hidden markers of trauma, and contradictions in her recorded history forced scientists to confront a chilling possibility. Someone wanted Nefertiti erased forever. Let's begin with the discovery that raised a lot of questions.
Nefertiti and Amenhotep basically created their own religion. They said, this is the way it is. We are in charge. We are second to God. The end. So people were a little upset.
The woman they found in the tomb. She was lying naked on a tomb floor, her face destroyed beyond recognition, and when DNA finally revealed who she was, it exposed secrets the ancient world tried to bury forever. In 1898, archaeologist Victor Loret discovered tomb KV-35 in the Valley of the Kings. Inside a side chamber, he found something that didn't belong: a female mummy with no coffin, no jewelry, no identification, and completely naked. Royal women were never left exposed in this manner. Even in chaotic times, they received proper burial preparations. But this woman had been stripped of everything. The damage to her body was immediate and disturbing. The entire left side of her face was gone, cheek, jaw, and parts of her skull crushed into a gaping cavity. Her right arm was missing. A hole punctured her cranium. For over a century, archaeologists assumed tomb robbers had smashed her face while looting jewelry, but the injury pattern didn't match typical robber damage. The fracture lines suggested a single, massive blow delivered at an angle inconsistent with chisel marks. Her mummification was also strange. The embalmers hadn't removed her brain, which was standard practice for elite burials. They had stuffed linen packing directly into the facial wound, a technique used only when bodies arrived with fresh trauma. This detail became critical later. It meant the wound existed before or at the moment of death. For decades, she remained unidentified, just another anonymous mummy in Egypt's vast collection. Then in 2010, everything changed. The Egyptian government finally authorized genetic testing on royal mummies, and researchers published their results in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The DNA analysis revealed something nobody expected. The naked woman with the destroyed face was the daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen Taye. She was Akhenaten's full sister. And most shocking of all, she was the biological mother of Tutankhamun. This meant the boy king was the product of full sibling incest, explaining his clubfoot, cleft palate, and the genetic disorders that plagued his short life. But it also raised a darker question. How did this royal woman, Tutankhamun's mother, a king's daughter, end up naked, mutilated, and dumped in a side chamber like discarded trash? Forensic experts examined the skull fracture more carefully. Some, like Zahi Hawass, argued it was an accident, perhaps a kick from a horse or a fall from a chariot. Others, including radiologist Ashraf Salim and researcher Julian Heath, believed the wound was too focused and too powerful to be accidental. They proposed something darker, a deliberate blow from a heavy object, possibly an axe or club, delivered with lethal force. And here's where the mystery deepens. For years, some scholars believed this battered woman wasn't just any royal. She was Nefertiti herself. The Nefertiti connection. What if the most famous queen in Egyptian history had been hiding in plain sight all along, her identity concealed behind a smashed face and a missing name? When the younger lady's DNA results became public, a handful of researchers immediately wondered, could this be Nefertiti? The timing fit. She was from the right generation, connected to Akhenaten's family, and clearly important enough to be buried in the Valley of the Kings despite the unusual circumstances. Her violent end would explain why Nefertiti vanished from historical records around year 12 of Akhenaten's reign, not because she died quietly, but because she was killed and deliberately erased. The theory gained traction because Nefertiti's fate has always been Egypt's greatest unsolved mystery. Unlike other royal women whose tombs and mummies have been identified, Nefertiti simply disappeared. She ruled alongside Akhenaten during one of the most radical periods in Egyptian history, appearing in art as his equal, wearing the war crown, smiting enemies, and standing in positions of power no other queen had held. Then suddenly, nothing. No tomb, no burial announcement, no inscription explaining what happened to her. In ancient Egypt, this kind of absence was never accidental. The Egyptians were obsessed with afterlife preparation, spending years constructing elaborate tombs for their rulers. For someone as prominent as Nefertiti to leave no trace suggested something deliberate. Either her burial was hidden, or she was intentionally erased through damnatio memoriae, the systematic destruction of someone's memory to deny them immortality. So when the younger lady's DNA revealed a royal woman from exactly the right time period, buried in suspicious circumstances with evidence of violence, the connection seemed almost too perfect to ignore. But there was a problem. The DNA also showed that the younger lady was the daughter of Amenhotep III, making her a king's daughter, a specific genealogical title that appeared in official records. Nefertiti, however, was never identified with this title in any surviving inscription. Every reference to her lineage points elsewhere, suggesting she came from a different family, possibly not even royal by birth. Most Egyptologists now reject the identification based on this contradiction. If the younger lady was Amenhotep III's daughter, she cannot be Nefertiti. The genetic evidence is too clear, but a minority refuses to let go. They argue that inscriptions could have been altered during the political chaos after Akhenaten's death. Perhaps Nefertiti's true origins were deliberately obscured to elevate her status, or to erase her from history after the backlash against Aten worship. In their view, the absence of records about her parents isn't proof of foreign origins, it's evidence that someone rewrote the story. Regardless of whether the younger lady is Nefertiti, her DNA exposed something far more disturbing about the royal family, a genetic catastrophe that explains why so many of them died young, sick, and possibly murdered. The genetic nightmare. The DNA didn't just reveal family relationships, it exposed a bloodline so poisoned by incest that it produced pharaohs too sick to stand and a dynasty collapsing from within. The 2010 genetic study mapped the relationships within the Amarna dynasty with shocking precision. Tutankhamun wasn't just the child of siblings, he was the latest branch in a family tree already strangling itself with inbreeding. The consequences were written all over his skeleton: clubfoot, cleft palate, bone necrosis, malaria, and fragile health that likely contributed to his death at just 19 years old. But the damage went deeper than one boy king. Researchers found evidence of multiple generations of close inbreeding, with siblings marrying siblings and producing heirs who were genetically compromised from conception. This wasn't an isolated scandal, it was royal policy. The family believed their blood was divine, passed directly from the gods, and had to remain pure at any cost. Power stayed concentrated by keeping marriages within the family, generation after generation. The genetic deterioration created a political crisis. Tutankhamun's wife, Ankhesenamun, suffered at least 2 miscarriages or stillbirths. Both daughters were buried with him, their tiny mummified bodies standing as proof of the dynasty's failing bloodline. When healthy heirs couldn't be produced, succession became unstable. Rivals circled, generals positioned themselves, courtiers saw opportunities in the vacuum. This is where Nefertiti's story intersects with the genetic catastrophe. Whether she was born into this system or married into it, she existed at the center of a royal order being destroyed by its own DNA. If deformed heirs triggered succession crises and every stillborn child shifted the balance of power, even a queen's survival depended on how useful or how dangerous her bloodline was perceived to be. The DNA evidence also revealed something else. The Amarna period wasn't just a time of religious revolution. It was a dynasty and genetic collapse, producing rulers too weak to maintain control, and creating the perfect environment for violence, betrayal, and elimination of threats. When you combine failing genetics with absolute power and ruthless politics, you get a recipe for murder. And the younger lady proved something critical. Royal women weren't protected by their titles. They could be beaten, killed, and erased if they became inconvenient. Her smashed face and humiliating burial weren't just tragic, they were proof that violence didn't stop at the palace gates. This genetic nightmare explains why so many from this era died young, why the throne changed hands so frequently, and why someone as powerful as Nefertiti could vanish without explanation. The royal court wasn't just dangerous because of political intrigue, it was lethal because the bloodline itself was toxic. Which brings us to the question everyone's been asking. If Nefertiti wasn't the younger lady, then where is she, and what happened to her? Who was Nefertiti, really? Before she disappeared, Nefertiti wasn't just a queen. She was a revolutionary who helped tear down Egypt's gods, and that made her the most dangerous woman in the kingdom. Nefertiti ruled during Egypt's 18th dynasty alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten, but calling her just his wife misses the point entirely. She was his co-ruler, appearing in art and inscriptions as his equal in ways no previous queen had. Together, they orchestrated one of the most radical upheavals in Egyptian history. They abandoned the traditional pantheon of gods and demanded exclusive worship of Aten, the sun disk. This wasn't a gentle religious reform, it was a direct assault on the priesthood of Amun, which had accumulated enormous wealth and political power over centuries. Akhenaten and Nefertiti shut down temples, redirected tribute, and concentrated religious authority in the royal household. They built a new capital city, Amarna, where they ruled as the sole intermediaries between Aten and humanity. What made Nefertiti extraordinary was how visibly she exercised power. Reliefs show her wearing the war crown, standing with bound captives beneath her feet, and smiting enemies, imagery traditionally reserved for pharaohs. In some scenes, she takes the active role while Akhenaten observes. These weren't symbolic representations, they were political statements. The message was clear: Nefertiti ruled, but their revolution created powerful enemies. The priesthood lost wealth and influence. Traditional temples fell into disrepair. The people, who had worshipped the old gods for generations, grew resentful. Egypt's borders weakened as the royal couple focused inward on religious transformation rather than military expansion. By the time Akhenaten's reign entered its final years, the entire system was unstable. Then, around year 12, Nefertiti vanished from the record. No more inscriptions, no more artistic depictions, no explanation. Theories multiplied. Did she die naturally, perhaps in childbirth, or from disease? Was she exiled when the political backlash grew too strong? Did she transform into a male pharaoh, possibly Neferneferuaten or Smenkhkar, to rule after Akhenaten's decline? Or was she murdered by rivals determined to restore the old order? The most unsettling possibility is deliberate erasure. After Akhenaten died, Egypt violently reversed course. Temples to Aten were demolished. Akhenaten's monuments were destroyed. His name was chiseled from every surface. The priests reclaimed power, and everything associated with the Aten cult became toxic. If Nefertiti resisted this restoration, or worse, tried to rule independently, she would have been an obstacle that needed elimination. And here's what we know for certain. She left no confirmed tomb. In a civilization that spent decades preparing for the afterlife, this absence is deafening. It suggests her death wasn't just hidden, it was covered up. So if the younger lady isn't Nefertiti, who else could it be? And why hasn't anyone found her after more than a century of searching? The other candidates. Egypt's museums and tombs hold dozens of unidentified female mummies from the right time period, and Nefertiti could be any one of them, or none of them. After the younger lady was ruled out by most scholars, attention shifted to other candidates. The strongest contender is a mummy known as KV-21b, discovered in a badly damaged tomb in the Valley of the Kings. 2 female bodies were found there, both in poor condition, with little remaining tissue and no identifying inscriptions. Early DNA testing suggested they belonged to the 18th dynasty royal line, but the results were incomplete. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's most prominent archaeologist, has repeatedly claimed KV-21b is the best candidate for Nefertiti. In September 2022, he announced that DNA results would be revealed in October. That announcement never came. In 2023, he made similar promises. In 2024, he said definitive results would arrive within 2 months. They haven't. This pattern of unfulfilled promises has made many scholars skeptical about any claims involving KV-21b until peer-reviewed evidence actually appears. Another theory emerged in 2015 when British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves proposed that Tutankhamun's tomb concealed hidden chambers. He noticed anomalies in the walls and suggested that radar scans showed voids behind them. Reeves believed one chamber might contain Nefertiti's burial, with Tutankhamun hastily interred in what was originally her tomb. Ground-penetrating radar produced mixed results. Some scans suggested voids, others didn't. Egyptian authorities never authorized the invasive testing needed to confirm or disprove the theory, leaving it suspended in debate. The fundamental problem is this: without a confirmed DNA sample from Nefertiti herself, every identification attempt involves comparing unknowns to unknowns. The Amarna family practiced incest across multiple generations, creating a genetic tangle that makes definitive matching nearly impossible. Even if researchers found a mummy from the right period with the right family connections, proving it's specifically Nefertiti requires either inscriptions or multiple genetic markers lining up perfectly, neither of which has happened. There's also the possibility that Nefertiti was never buried in the Valley of the Kings at all. Some believe she remained in Amarna, the capital city she helped build. Others think her body was destroyed during the anti-Aten backlash, denying her any burial. Still others argue she's been misidentified and is sitting in a museum storage room under a different label, her true identity lost to administrative confusion. What makes the search so compelling is that her body almost certainly exists somewhere. Royal mummies were rarely completely destroyed. Even hated rulers like Akhenaten had their remains preserved, albeit hidden and damaged. If Nefertiti's contemporaries went to such lengths to erase her memory, they likely hid rather than destroyed her body. But here's the truly terrifying part. Even without finding Nefertiti herself, the DNA evidence from her era has revealed exactly how dangerous it was to be a powerful woman in that court. What the DNA actually proved. The DNA can't tell us what happened to Nefertiti specifically, but it revealed something worse. A world where queens could be murdered and erased without consequence. But here's what the DNA evidence has proven beyond doubt. First, royal women from this period could meet violent deaths. The younger lady's smashed face demonstrates that even the mother of a pharaoh, a woman with the highest possible royal bloodline, could be killed with impunity. Whether her death was accidental or intentional, the fact that she ended up naked, damaged, and dumped in a side chamber shows that gender and status offered no protection. Second, the genetic catastrophe was real and devastating. Multiple generations of sibling marriages produced heirs with severe congenital problems, creating political instability that made the throne vulnerable. When healthy succession couldn't be guaranteed, power struggles intensified, and anyone perceived as a threat, including powerful queens, became expendable. Third, deliberate historical erasure was common practice. The systematic destruction of Akhenaten's monuments, the chiseling away of names, and the demolition of attained temples prove that Egyptian authorities were perfectly willing to erase people from history. If Nefertiti was targeted for similar treatment, it would explain her total absence from the archaeological record. Fourth, the political environment during the collapse of Aten worship was extraordinarily dangerous. The priesthood was reclaiming power, traditional factions were reasserting control, and anyone too closely associated with Akhenaten's revolution faced retribution. Nefertiti wasn't just associated with it, she was one of its architects. In that climate, her survival would have been remarkable, not her death. What makes these findings terrifying isn't that they solve Nefertiti's mystery, it's that they show her disappearance fits a pattern. The younger lady serves as a proxy. If Tutankhamun's mother could die violently and be erased from proper burial, then Nefertiti, a woman with far more visibility and political enemies, faced even greater danger. The DNA evidence has transformed this from legend into evidence-based theory. We now have biological proof of violence, genetic collapse, and systematic erasure happening to people in Nefertiti's immediate circle. Her disappearance is no longer an isolated mystery. It's part of a documented pattern of how the royal court dealt with threats during its most unstable period. So, was Nefertiti murdered, exiled, or transformed into a hidden pharaoh? The evidence points in one disturbing direction: the murder theory. When you combine religious backlash, genetic desperation, and a queen who wielded unprecedented power, assassination stops being speculation and starts looking like the most logical explanation. If Nefertiti was murdered, the motive was everywhere. She wasn't just Akhenaten's wife, she was the co-architect of the most hated religious revolution in Egyptian history. Together, they dismantled a spiritual system that had governed Egypt for centuries, enraging the priesthood and destabilizing society. When Akhenaten died, Egypt snapped back to the old gods with violent force. Temples reopened, priests reclaimed power, and everything connected to Aten worship became radioactive. Nefertiti would have been the ultimate target. If she tried to preserve any part of the revolution, she threatened the entire restoration. If she attempted to rule independently, which historical fragments suggest she might have, she challenged the traditional power structure even further. In a court where Akhenaten's very name was being chiseled from monuments, keeping his most prominent partner alive made no political sense. The timing supports this. Her disappearance coincides with the final years of Akhenaten's reign, exactly when political pressure would have peaked. The succession crisis that followed, with the mysterious figures Neferuaten and Smenkhkare briefly holding power before Tutankhamun's installation, suggests chaos and power struggles. In that environment, the elimination of rivals was standard practice. The younger lady's fate proves royal women weren't immune to violence. If Tutankhamun's mother could be killed and humiliated in burial, Nefertiti faced the same risk. The difference is that Nefertiti had more enemies: the priesthood she helped disempower, courtiers who resented her influence, military commanders who blamed the Amarna period for Egypt's weakened borders, and potential heirs who saw her as an obstacle. There's also the pattern of erasure. Nefertiti didn't just die, she was removed from history. No tomb, no death announcement, no recorded burial. In Egypt, denying someone a proper tomb wasn't negligence. It was punishment. It stripped them of immortality by removing their name and body from the afterlife equation. Other disgraced rulers faced similar treatment, but even they left traces. Nefertiti's absence is more complete, suggesting whoever erased her wanted the job done thoroughly. The circumstantial evidence piles up. Political enemies motivated by religious fervor, a collapsing dynasty desperate for stability, proven violence against royal women, and the complete erasure of her memory. None of this is proof, but it creates a disturbingly coherent narrative. What's most chilling is the silence itself. In ancient Egypt, where every important event was recorded in stone, where pharaohs documented their achievements obsessively, the fact that no one mentioned what happened to one of the most prominent queens in history suggests intentional suppression. Someone didn't want anyone to know how or why she died. Thank you for staying with us to the end. See you in the next video.